Greetings to all, Jimmy is with you as always. I hope you have prepared well for the stories. Today, we have another 2 parts, and they promise to be cool. Thank you to everyone who supports me. I am very grateful to you. I will not detain you. Let's get started. First story today from the user ThrowRA, let's listen. I'm here for genuine advice, looking especially for advice from people who have been the child in this situation. I know I screwed up. I don't need anyone to tell me again. 2 years ago, my ex-wife, female 40, found out I had been cheating with my current girlfriend, female 29, and immediately divorced me. We had a very civil split, and both agreed not to tell our girls what led to it. A year ago, my GF and I started renting walking distance from my ex-wife. This has muddled our 50-50 custody agreement, as my girls sometimes come over while on their mom's week, and sometimes go to their mom's on my week. They basically come and go as they please from both homes, but generally sleep at the custodial parent's house. My GF has recently taken issue with this. She doesn't like that they come over without asking, and that we get no kid-free time. She's asked me to enforce a boundary with my girls that they cannot come over on their mom's weeks unless we explicitly invite them. I told her absolutely not. I pay 100% of our living expenses, and I'm not going to make my girls feel unwelcome in a house I pay for. She then made the comment that maybe they wouldn't want to come over anymore if they knew what I had done and with who. I've decided it's time for them to know the truth. I can't have this threat hanging over me. How can I do this? What do I say? Do I involve a third party? Should their mom be there? I just don't know how to admit I blew up all our lives for nothing. Has anyone gone through this with their father and came out with an intact relationship? Author update this story. I took everyone's advice and involved my ex-wife in this situation. Safe to say she was pissed off at my poor choice in partners and having to deal with this BS. But we got together with the girls at ex-wife's house and told them. Many of you suspected the girls already knew. Incorrect. Apparently they thought we broke up because of my job and my refusal to accept a new one. We did not lie to them during the divorce and tell them an untrue reason. We just told them that relationship issues are private and we would be willing to have a discussion when they were all adults. So thankfully, there is no trust lost in my ex-wife, which some of you were concerned about. All my girls were incredibly upset. They were being cordial with my GF because their mom encouraged them to be civil, but apparently hated her. They couldn't believe I would give up my wife for her, our family, and their stability, which is fair. They are refusing to see me for now. My ex and I are going to get them into therapy, and I'm hopeful that over time we can rebuild a relationship. My oldest is furious and has sent me some scathing messages and then blocked me, so I am really concerned about her and I. I missed some of her huge life events due to my affair, and I think that will be hard for her to forgive. As for the GF, she is gone plain and simple. She has her next partner lined up and is moving to be with him. I can't say I'm hurt about that, which shows me how little I cared for her. I just feel relieved. A bunch of you suggested getting back with my ex-wife. Unfortunately, that topic has been breached when the affair was discovered, and she is 100% uninterested. She takes her job as a mom very seriously, and in her mind, the girls would eventually know, and it would be setting a bad example for them to take back a cheater. Even independently of that, cheating has always been a deal breaker for her. I feel bad as she was planning on moving her partner in and now feels like she has to delay it until the girls are in a better place. She was really angry with me, especially for that reason. In her anger, she's also let it slip that her and her partner are planning on marrying in the next few years and having another child. She's never shared anything personal with me, past allowing me to meet her partner before the girls did, so that was a shock to me. I'm trying to process that information. That hurts more than my GF cheating and leaving, which tells me I have a lot more work to do in getting over her. There is a permanence in her marrying that I am not prepared for. It's been a sobering experience for me. Thank you to everyone who legitimately gave me advice. It was very helpful. If I could in turn offer some advice, don't cheat on your partner. The grass is greener where you water it, and if I had taken the time, effort, energy I gave my affair partner and invested it in myself or my wife, I would be incredibly happy right now. And as a side note to all the men messaging, commenting, congratulating me for getting a younger woman, that doesn't matter. I've never looked at my ex-wife and thought she was old or unattractive, and she was better in bed than my ex-GF. This had nothing to do with getting a younger woman trading my wife in. It had to do with a self-destructive ego that has led to the most important people in my life hating me. All that is irrelevant. Don't get caught up in it. What I think about this story. I have this theory that people who stay in committed relationships from an early age, like OP and his ex, who got together at 13, are holding each other back from a lot of mental growth. I'm not saying it's the ex's fault at all, though. It's not like she held him hostage. I do think there's something to the fact that people become more mature when they leave the place they grew up in and go experience the world independently. Let's check the user's comments and OP answers. She sounds like she doesn't understand you had a family before you hooked up with her and what being a parent entails. She sounds selfish. Her threatening to tell your girls that is awful and malicious. The pain she would cause them is unnecessary. My ex-husband cheated on me a lot, and to this day my adult children do not know that. They don't need to know that. Their dad may have hurt me and broke up our family, but I already processed the pain from the cheating. They don't need to go through it themselves. You have to ask yourself if you really like someone that would be willing to hurt your kids so she can have her way. Planning date nights and keeping those plans would have been an easy thing to ask for. When you have kids, privacy is really not super existent. You can still prioritize time with her without creating a storm with your kids. She doesn't sound mature enough to properly have a conversation about making some time for you guys to have dates and spend some time together without asking you to enforce the kids staying with their mom on her time, unfortunately. Not to mention you both hooked up when you were married originally. Not only did you step out, she was okay being the side chick. That says something about her character. Life isn't a competition to see if you will pick her first. First, it was your wife she was competing with. Now she has an issue with your kids. The problem is that during the first 6 months of our affair, before my ex found out, I was a bad father. I would go on business trips all the time and was basically an absent father. I think she expected I would be a weekend dad rather than want 50-50 custody, and it was a shock to her to spend much less time with me than before our affair was discovered. I will be breaking up with her for a multitude of reasons, but her understanding of our family dynamics, i.e. me never being around, has contributed to this as her expectations were based on a version of a father I didn't want to continue being. Probably need to know why you cheated before we can come up with a solid answer. Dead bedroom? Out of love? Vulgar incompatible? I don't think it matters, but none of the above. I had been with my ex-wife since we were 13, and our relationship was generally great, even almost 25 years later. In therapy, the past year I realized that my problem was, she has always been better than me at everything growing up and into adulthood. Better at sports, got better grades, got into a better school, better scholarship, better job, better parent, etc. At the time, she was also frustrated with me because I refused to leave my workplace for a job that paid significantly more. She never made me feel inferior, but I myself felt that I wasn't enough for her. My fault, not hers. When I met my GF, I felt superior to her because I had more money and was more educated or intelligent and had more materialistic things, and it was an intoxicating feeling. Even though I knew she was attracted to my money, in my value system, I was still superior and had the upper hand, so to speak. I felt like a big man. It's pathetic, and I'm trying to unlearn the way I think about people's worth. Secondary to that, she's not more attractive than my ex-wife physically, but I had only been with 2 people, and the second was a one-night stand when we broke up briefly at 21. She was very interested in me, persistent and decently attractive, and that coupled with my ego led to an affair. It's not an excuse. It's something that could have been prevented by communication, therapy, but I was a different person a few years back. Second story from the user Cheap Protein. Let's listen. My 31 female husband Greg, 33 male, and I have 1 child, Jacob, 7 male. Greg and I work on different schedules, including many weekends, so we spend a lot of time watching Jacob separately. I get him ready in the morning. Greg deals with dinner and bedtime. About a year ago, Greg started occasionally spanking Jacob for discipline when I'm not around, even though he knows I don't agree with it, and I have asked him not to. This has happened a few different times over the past year. A few days ago, Greg spanked Jacob again, and we had a big argument about it, not in Jacob's presence. I have been frustrated that Greg isn't interested in reading information against spanking. He says that Jacob doesn't care about being sent to his room or a corner, which is somewhat true, and that his behavior issues have improved since this started. Like a cliche, Greg says that he got spanked, he deserved it, and turned out fine. Greg's late mother, Diane, even gave babysitters permission to spank her kids, and it wasn't a big deal, according to Greg. Anyway, after Greg started referencing his childhood and his mother, I impulsively lashed out and rather harshly reminded him that Diane A. considered him a loser, and B. blamed him for her final illness and death. Now, Greg's brother is a primary care doctor who works in the government. Greg works in the financial sector and most likely does better financially than the brother. But over the years that I knew her, Diane was very open in thinking that a financial sector job was nothing compared to any kind of a doctor, and about her bitter disappointment and shame that Greg never got a postgraduate degree. In 2019, Diane was diagnosed with lung cancer despite the fact that she had never smoked. She reacted poorly in terms of mental health and had a rather hysterical response where she questioned whether Greg might be to blame because Greg was the only one in the family who was ever a cigarette smoker, despite the fact that Greg quit years earlier before Jacob was born. Greg believed that he had rarely, if ever, smoked in front of Diane because she didn't like it, but she claimed that at least once he smoked while driving her in a car on a road trip, and that there were other times. Anyway, Diane held Greg at least partly responsible for her lung cancer because of whatever secondhand smoke she experienced from him, and there was a rift between them. Diane even said that she was considering changing her will because Greg wouldn't take responsibility for the secondhand smoke. But before Diane could follow through on that, COVID hit. And while she was being treated for her cancer, she caught COVID during its first wave and went downhill quickly from that instead. Because of COVID, Greg wasn't able to say goodbye or try to repair the rift in person, and there was not even a proper funeral. Even though Greg isn't the one who gave her COVID, which she actually died from, as far as we know, her final comment on Greg was negative and blaming, unfortunately. Anyway, that's the background. I have apologized, but since I said this, Greg has been distant towards me, is sleeping in another room, and I'm worried that I ruined Christmas. Eta? What can I do to repair this rift before Christmas? Author update this story. A few things to clarify that maybe I should have explained better in the original post. Where I referred to spanking, I mean that Greg hit our son Jacob, 7 years old second grader, not a 7-month baby, on the rear end using his open hand. I haven't seen any bruising from it. I have done some research and my understanding is, where I live, it's unlikely that the Child Protection Agency would intervene even if it was more severe corporal punishment like with a belt, but it isn't, not that this isn't already bad. Did Greg do it behind my back? Kind of. Greg works 9 to 5 and my work is mostly late afternoon, evening, and we both sometimes work on weekends too, so our childcare time is mostly naturally separate. Greg wasn't secretive about it and told me what happened on each occasion, but continually dismissed me when I tried to explain why it was wrong, and he should not. What he did was something that was pretty strongly against my wishes when I wasn't there, and it made me feel like I have to choose between my career and getting in the way of this. So that's why I was angry. To explain further, Greg started the spanking about a year ago when he decided that Jacob had developed understanding of right and wrong and therefore needed punishment when he misbehaved. He did try other things first, like timeout, which was my go-to, quickly decided that those were ineffective, and then tried spanking because of his own childhood. Before roughly a year ago, he didn't do much to discipline Jacob at all because he still thought of Jacob as more of a baby. However, what I actually said to Greg in the argument about the spanking was a bit more hurtful than how I described it in the original post. I actually said something like, "You know that Diane died thinking of you as the second-class loser who killed her, right?" So I toned that down a little in the post. I used the phrase second-class loser, not just loser, and the verb kill. In the moment, I meant to discredit what Greg was saying about how his mother's pro-spanking parenting was fine, but the comment was pretty strong from Greg's POV, and I do understand that. I was alluding to the fact that Greg's brother was the more favored child to Diane, at least once they grew up, and because Greg's brother is a doctor. Greg never had closure over Diane's death and her blaming him at the end of her life. And this is an extremely sore subject for him, which I am well aware of. Also, I want to clarify that at the time of my last post, I did not want to speak to a mandated reporter-type person, mainly because I thought that Greg would feel ganged up on if I had him meet with someone who sided with me about the spanking, like any mental health professional, and that would be the wrong move after what I said. Again, I don't think our family would be in legal jeopardy based on this where I live, but it's also true that anyone can report for anything. You never know what other people will do, and if someone like that tried, it would be stressful and put further pressure on my marriage, to say the least. Breaking up the family or more stressful issues isn't what I want. Anyway, Greg and I talked before Christmas Eve. He said that he still needed time to cool off and think on his own, but he agreed to pretend that everything was fine between us until after the holidays for Jacob and because our other relatives were around. So we acted our way through Christmas, and I think that was the right thing to do for Jacob. 3 days ago, we had our talk. I did incorporate this helpful comment by Writer Girl to help plan what to say. Basically, I apologized, but he didn't, and we are where we started as far as the spanking issue goes. Greg feels he did nothing wrong. He acknowledges going against me, but he doesn't think we have to obey each other, and that it's normal for a mother and father to have different parenting styles and levels of strictness. He still isn't going outside his information bubble or taking research into consideration. He says he doesn't want to give up on our marriage because it's important for him that Jacob grows up in an intact home. But what I said made him question whether I love him as much as he loves me, and he is still very hurt that I would say that. I have tried many times to reassure him, but he is still cool towards me. So as for our marriage, Greg has agreed to start therapy for himself at my urging, but it will not be couples therapy or anything focused on his parenting. After he has done that for a while, he will consider doing couples therapy with me. What I think about this story. Greg needs therapy, stat. Talk about bleeding trauma through the generations. That mom needs to step up, or she'll be cut off when the child is grown as well, because she didn't do job number 1 of being a parent. Protect your child. Thanks to everyone who watched to the end. Do not forget to watch the second video that will be released today. I love you all. Bye-bye.